Hi there, I'm Rick Macci and we're at the Rick Macci Tennis Academy in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm here with Dr. Brian Gordon, the #1 swing coach, in my opinion, in the world. Let me ask you this, because this is where, I think tennis coaches in general, and even the general public, a lot of times people in tennis, they might teach people how they were taught, or they teach people what they read, or they teach people what they think. Not that that's bad, because there might be some good nuggets there and some good stuff to feed off of. Don't you feel that if you don't have some type of knowledge in biomechanics, it's almost impossible to really teach someone the optimal way to do the mechanics of the strokes in tennis?
Well, we're talking about the most complicated set of motions in any sport. Having played or been involved with almost every sport, I feel pretty comfortable saying between the serve, the forehand, the volley, and all the adaptations of them, there's not a more complicated set of human motions. And I get the coaching part, and I did the same thing. I mean, you have to start from some basis of how you teach someone, and for everyone that's their own experience, how they did it, how they were taught. But there's another group of people, and I believe you're right, that are searching for more knowledge and understand that, you can't, or it's certainly exceptionally important to understand the driving force behind everything, which is the physics and the physiology of the motion. If you don't have some working information about that, then how can you actually truly take someone to the highest level?
Everyone, when the kids are younger, and I know a lot of this is predicated on size and strength and so on, would you suggest diving in at an early age and trying to do these strokes that we're going to talk about at an early age? Because I know there's been a lot of pushback with other teaching pros around the world, and I think it's because they don't understand, even though everybody has something to offer. Because a lot of times when you don't know, you push back. And that's human nature, that's life, it's not just teaching tennis.
To change their stroke mechanics to this new shorter version, or more optimized version, the version that you see on the men's pro tour in particular, it triples, quadruples, maybe even more the time that it takes to build this stuff in. Because the muscle memory, as you say, is a very powerful thing. And if you can avoid that pitfall by making this really the only thing that their body knows, life's a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And what I've learned from my experiences in working with you here at the Academy is, when I first got here, the method was fully defined, really. Much of the mechanics were fully defined, but I was amazed to see, because you are more aggressive than I was, frankly, about actually building this into smaller and smaller kids and seeing how they would do. And it surprised even me to see that it isn't really about size and strength. It's about, for any given individual, allowing their muscular systems to work at the most efficient level. The way that this information comes about is you look at a variety of players, hundreds or thousands of players, and
which you've done. Which you've done. With high-speed video.
Well, it's high-speed video, but it's 3D motion analysis. The motion analysis systems allow you to map or measure the motion very accurately in 3 dimensions at high speeds. And what that allows you to do is put numbers to the movements. So in other words, I can basically make a graphical output in 3 dimensions of what the body's doing, and that gives me the information I need to calculate the physics behind it. So if you look at a 2-dimensional video, obviously video has advanced a long way and you can get a lot of information, but it's biased by the angle that you're looking at.
Right.
You're looking at clothing and skin, and these aren't the things that we look at in biomechanics. In biomechanics, we're interested in what is the skeletal structure doing? What are the forces of the muscles pulling at the skeletal structure doing? So this is a lot different than looking at a video of Fed hitting a forehand and going, oh, this is how it works, this is how it works. No, this is looking at many people in both basic and applied research, and actually making these calculations of velocities, speeds, accelerations, how the muscles are pulling, the physics, the core physics or mechanics, not based on any individual player. It's a summation of research over 2 decades of looking at lots of data and saying, oh, that makes sense, this doesn't make sense. Oh, I understand this now because I have the information to see how this muscle's pulling or how this is accelerating or what body motions make the racket head speed what it is.
And you could actually be doing more harm to someone's stroke if you only got bits and pieces of what we're talking about, because you are going to cut down the radius, which we're going to get into here. Doing these strokes, the way we're going to get into, is a staple for everybody. And I always play the what if game when I see people on the tour and I analyze them. What if they had this backhand? What if they had this serve? And a lot of that is mechanics. And I understand you're going to be so tall and so quick and so fast, and some people have fast twitch muscles, and some people, there's other mitigating factors that go into the final product. But how you hit the ball, okay, and the habits that you build as a youngster stay with you a lifetime. And unfortunately, there's good ones and bad ones.
I think you say, you ask all these people, wouldn't you want to have a shorter stroke and develop more racket speed? And I think anyone would say they would want to do that. I think what the question has always been is that something you can actually do? Because it defies common sense, at least in tennis, in a lot of respects, get speed. But even realistically, people have always said that the bigger the loop, the bigger the swing, the more racket speed you can develop. So then when we come out and say, guess what? You can have a shorter stroke and still have more racket speed. It goes against basically everything that's ever been said in the sport of tennis. So as I looked at all of these things and started generating the numbers, what I found is the interesting thing about human biomechanics or biomechanics compared to physics is that in biomechanics, you take into consideration the physiological properties of the muscular system, which is a pretty amazing thing. And when you learn the concepts that the force, the amount of pulling force that a muscle can make is not constant, it changes. There's things that you can do to muscles to make them produce more force. One of the most notable ones is, then there's several, but one of the most notable ones is this notion to say that the actual joint motions that are required to fulfill this stroke are the absolute minimum that you would need to do. If you could sit down and say, what's the minimum number of joint rotations that I could use to make a backswing, a swing to the ball, and that's really all we care about, but also a follow through to safely stop it, what would that look like? And guess what? It looks a lot like the simplest possible method by which you could get to a place to go forward to the ball. It requires only, that's one of many examples how the shorter swing can produce more racket speed because the muscular system is optimized because of the muscular properties. But it's amazing how quickly that breaks down when you increase the complexity. So now I go to the other side of the net with my racket in a basket and I hit them a few balls and it's a disaster. So for whatever reason in their mind, because the complexity increased, their ability to focus on the new motor pattern is decreased because now they have to worry about getting to the ball, the height of the ball, this and that and the other. It goes away. So the next level of complexity is, could you stick someone out on a court and have them hit live with another player and see those patterns? So it's what I found interesting is how quickly can you actually take someone through the levels of complexity to replace a motor pattern with this new ATP forehand, and when could you watch them play the biggest match of their life and the biggest point of their life and hit that shot? Well, that's the point where they don't think about it at all.
So even though we're going to talk about the mechanics of the forehand or the backhand, I think we want to make it crystal clear that everything starts from the ground. It's what I call, you got to load the system, because so many times people start thinking, okay, well,
it's a combined action of the legs, the hips, the torso, and the shoulder making the arm go through. And all of that has to be fired in a very sequential manner. At a certain point around the time the ball bounces, I will release from this position and drop the racket. This is not a very well understood concept in tennis, but it's not actually all that simple, because you're trying to turn a linear force from the ground into a rotational effect at the hips.
So when you pull it, this is what you've coined or termed the flip. And I can remember when we first started talking about this years ago, I said a lot of teaching pros are going to think flip means flip your wrist. And you looked at me like, why would they think that, you know? And at the end of the day, if you would do that again, I think it's amazing if you see where your racket starts and
plus spin.
No, that's awesome. Okay, let's get into the finish.
Okay.
Okay, because a lot of times when people see stuff on TV, coaches, parents, kids, they see where these rackets are ending up, and they see what people come up with these terms, the wrap, the wiper, you know, you come up with all this stuff. Show me
piece. And so everything has been based on finishing in a certain position, like up in here like this, and all of these finishing positions, but that goes against everything in this stroke technique. Continental.
Does the grip, other than orientate the racket face, have any bearing on the ATP forehand and what you just described? Because I think
this flat, so it's affecting this. So the question is, does that affect really the core mechanical components of the stroke? And the answer is no.
12 o'clock, and this being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Where would you say would be the optimal place to come out of the backswing? 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 7, obviously that's going to the inside. And can the racket flip if it's not orientated in a certain area? Like we talked about the wrist pre-rolls, even though they might...
Minimalist approach. It's the simplest possible way, really, that you could go about doing this. But it optimizes the neuromuscular system in a very similar way to the way that we did on the forehand. Used on the forehand, it's also similar kinds of swings are used in junior tennis and at some levels pro tennis, where the racket is brought into this big loop. This is nothing like that. That is the model contact position, and there's some variations in it, but it's rather interesting to think about. And the interesting thing about studying the mechanics of the two-handed backhand is what is the role of what is the interaction of the two hands, and this is horribly understood in tennis coaching.
You want to hit it early,
but
you want to hit it on the rise, and the balls come faster. If you have this stroke, when the sun's shining, you feel great, and it's one of those days, sure, your forehand can be amazing. But day in and day out, the strokes you're talking about, they don't break down. They might break down because you make the wrong decision, or you're nervous, okay, or something of that. They're not breaking down because of the mechanical aspect of it. And that's what people don't understand. And it's just, I'm just like confused by that. And everybody will say, yeah, Rick, that makes sense, that makes sense. So if it makes sense, everybody should understand. There's not a wrong way to hit it or a right way. There's just a better way. And it's been my experience, the better way is the way you should be teaching the people no matter what age.